We are live this morning. Good morning and welcome to GBMC's Facebook Live. Michael J. from iHeartRadio do the afternoon show on 93.1 WPOC in Baltimore. And we've had a series of these Facebook Lives with GBMC, and we've had various topics. I'm really excited about the one we're having today. It's something that I talked about with the whole staff at GBMC when we were kind of coming up with concepts and ideas of what to address. Weight loss. It's something that we all talk about, we all think about, and in America we've got so much obesity as an issue. So we've got Dr. Timothee Friesen from GBMC, and we just met right before coming on Facebook Live. So tell me a little bit about your practice and your background.
Well, I'm actually a general surgeon, but I also do bariatric surgery. So I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, but I deal a lot with those topics in my work since I do bariatric surgery, which is obesity surgery. And I do that at GBMC.
Now, obesity is, you look at these scales and it says, you're morbidly obese or you are obese. Are those scales still appropriate today? And I'm not talking about the scales you stand on, that chart that we all look at.
Yeah. Well, we use BMI, so it's the body mass index. That's really what helps you to know if you're either overweight or obese or morbidly obese. And the way you do it is you basically compare your height to your weight. So if you're taller, obviously you're allowed to be a little
This thing is driving me nuts.
a little bit heavier. But if you go online or on apps, you can figure out your BMI very quickly. All you need to do is put your height and your weight, and you can figure it out. A BMI between 18 and 25 is normal. Above 25 is considered overweight. Over 30 is considered obese. And then after that, over 35 and 40, that's when you're considered morbidly obese. And that's when you can actually qualify to have obesity surgery, which is the type of surgery that I do. The reason why they have those definitions is basically because with each category, there's risks of medical problems that are associated. So once your BMI goes above 35, your risk of having cardiovascular problems, diabetes, high blood pressure, osteoarthritis, and lots of other medical problems goes up really fast. So that's why insurance companies are willing to pay for bariatric surgery.
Well, I'm sure there are people watching who might have questions. So here's what we're doing. Mindy is standing by with the camera, and she is taking questions. If you happen to have a question for Dr. Timothee Friesen regarding weight loss, as we head into the holidays, we welcome you to post it, and I will pass it along to the doctor, and we'll try to get an answer for you. So the first thing I want to ask you is diets. You hear about people trying various diets, and there's so many different kinds of diets. Why is it that diets don't seem to work?
Well, the main reason is that most diets are a temporary fix. They're a quick fix, and the problem is you need a solution for the rest of your life. You need something that's long-term, and that's usually what works. Kind of an interesting fact, I grew up in France. That's actually where I grew up.
Wow.
Until I was 18, and every time I go back to France, I'm just shocked by the difference. When you walk around in France, you don't really see too many obese people, and it's not because they're spending more time than we are at the gym or anything like that. It's basically because the way people eat in France is different than the way we eat here. It's mostly about the way we eat. I've asked sometimes, my sister lives in France, for example, and the main reason she doesn't want to move here is she's afraid that if she comes here, she's going to become obese. And in a way, it's kind of true. Like when you move to this country, you start eating the way Americans eat.
Right.
And there's a reason why the United States is the most obese country in the world. I think we're fighting with Mexico. I think sometimes Mexico goes above us, but overall we're near the top. And it's mainly because of our diet, and there's lots of other factors, but that's the main one.
Can we talk about maybe the top 2 or 3 things that are caught within our diet? What is it that we're doing wrong?
I think the number one thing is probably portion size. And all you have to do is go to a restaurant in the United States, and the way you're served food is what counts as a serving platter in most other countries. So for example, I'll compare with France again. When I go to a meal with my family in France, if there's 10 people, there's 10 pieces of chicken. And each person has what they're going to eat, and then they move on to the next course, which might be salad or cheese or a dessert or whatever. But in the United States, it's not like that. If there's 10 people, then there's going to be 30 pieces of chicken, and you basically eat until it starts hurting. And then you might have space for a dessert if you're really courageous. But I think portion size is a big one. The type of foods that we eat is also different. A lot of our foods are more processed than in other countries. People tend to cook less and reheat things, use processed foods. That's a big part of the problem as well.
Do you feel like people in France are exercising more?
No, definitely not. Definitely
Okay.
not. I mean, they some exercise, of course, but mainly it's because people walk a lot more. There's a lot more access to public transportation.
Right.
So it's kind
There's
of
more
like if you
activity.
it's kind of like if you live in New York City. Hardly any people, not very many people have cars in the city. In France, even if you live in even a rural area, usually has pretty good transportation. So you can take the bus, you can ride around. People ride their bikes. There's more. I think that's part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's a big thing.
I think I know what it is. They gave us French fries. See, we have the French fries, and they're in good shape. No, and what about
Those are
alcohol?
Belgian.
I think of France, and I think of wine. I mean, is
Yeah.
it if you're trying to lose weight,
Yeah.
should you be very, very cautious with alcohol, or how does that work?
So alcohol, obviously there's plenty of countries where people are not obese and they drink alcohol, but alcohol should be obviously in moderation. If you have one glass of wine with your dinner, that's perfectly fine. I mean, alcohol is mostly empty calories. There's not much of a nutritional benefit to alcohol, but there's definitely a social benefit, and I think one glass or a couple of glasses is definitely healthy. And there's some research that shows that there may be some health benefits associated with wine. And after bariatric surgery, for example, we recommend that you don't have alcohol for about a year.
Wow.
And that's because it's not because we don't want you to have fun or that alcohol is toxic in some way. It's just that it's empty calories, so you don't want to use the nutrition that you have and put alcohol in there when you could be drinking more healthy alternatives.
We're talking with Dr. Timothee Friesen from GBMC. He's a doctor who specializes in bariatric surgery. We've got a question about that type of thing. Marjorie says, due to my weight, I can't exercise now. Will I be able to exercise after bariatric surgery?
Well, one big problem that people have, and it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is once you're overweight, a lot of people start having arthritis in their joints, especially their knees and their hips, and they have trouble. Even walking becomes painful. So then, how do you exercise? Before you have weight loss, let's talk about not just people who have bariatric surgery, but even someone who doesn't. I think one of the best places for people who are overweight to exercise is at the pool, because what happens is it decreases the stress on your joints, and even just walking back and forth in a pool for 30 minutes, you're going to burn a lot of calories, and it's going to put very little stress on your joints. Now, after bariatric surgery, most people lose a significant amount of weight within the first 6 months. That's an opportunity. It takes weight off of your joints, and it definitely makes it possible for you to exercise at least a little bit more. If you take that opportunity, then it can become something that you start to enjoy, and it has to become something that takes over for the rest of your life, not just for a temporary thing.
Right. Is bariatric surgery an elective surgery, or is it something that, in other words, what I want to know is, at what point is that something people should consider?
So the term elective, it's not a very well defined term, but obesity is definitely a disease. If you look at, about half of the people at any one time in the hospital, when I'm rounding, about a lot of the conditions that people are in the hospital for are related or even caused by obesity. And so obesity is a real disease. And so when someone has surgery for obesity, it's because their obesity has become a disease that's causing them to have other health conditions. So it's not an elective procedure per se. It's not a cosmetic procedure. Most of the time we're doing it to treat either diabetes, mostly type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, osteoarthritis. I talked a lot about other things, but there's other conditions like PCOS that not too many people have heard about, but it's a condition where women are unable to have their periods, because of the obesity, the estrogen regulation becomes messed up because of the obesity. And if you're able to lose weight, 90% of those women start to have their cycles again and actually become able to become pregnant. So for a lot of people, especially people with very high BMI, it's not an elective procedure because they've already tried all the diets and the recommendations. And if you look at the statistics, most people who try fad diets or short fixes, a vast majority of them fail and even gain more weight afterwards.
So what is the answer then? I mean, part of the problem, I think, in America is that we're really busy, a lot of two-career families, we're going, everything, as you said, is processed. It's about quick.
Yeah.
And a lot of us find ourselves on the road, and the choices are limited. I think even though we have a lot of different types of restaurants. So what is a healthy way to live your life as far as eating?
It's definitely not easy. I mean, it's a daily struggle. I think it's kind of like, I look at people who are trying to quit smoking. There's statistics that show that to be able to quit smoking, most people have to quit like 10 times. It's not one time and you're going to be able to automatically get into, be able to quit smoking. When it comes to getting a good diet and be able to control your weight, there's several things that you can do that are easy. One thing to start with that a lot of people don't think about is keep a food diet. So keep track of what you're eating every day, because most people don't realize how many calories they're actually taking in. Once you keep track, even if it's for 1 or 2 days, just keep track of exactly what you're eating and be honest about it. And then if you look at how many calories most people on average spend, then you can see how many calories are added to your weight every day. And most people don't realize how many calories they're eating, but it can be even 3,000 or 4,000 calories. So every day they're eating 2,000 more calories than what their body needs. So no wonder they gain weight. Mm-hmm. And once you actually you realize what you're eating, it can help. Another thing is not skipping meals. So eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, preparing meals in advance. So even if you have a busy diet, a busy schedule, I see a lot of my partners, surgeons, who are obviously very busy people. A lot of them will prepare something in a Tupperware or something like that the day before, so that they're not tempted to go to quick foods like pizza and things that we know are not healthy. If you have something ready, at least it's less of a temptation to go to that. Portion size is a big thing. So some studies have shown that if you have smaller plates, even just the fact of having a smaller plate makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. If you have a big serving bowl as a plate, it's going to be very hard for you to control how much food you actually put in there, and you're not going to realize that you're actually eating way too much. One of the diets that nutritionists have looked at that seems like a pretty healthy way to eat is something called sort of a Mediterranean type of diet. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically eating mostly, trying to maximize the amount of things that are related to plants. So a plant-based diet with whole grains, lots of legumes, nuts, olive oil instead of butter, and using herbs and spices rather than salt to spice things instead of to give them taste. And overall, that seems to be a healthy way of eating that is not like a fad diet that's going to be a short-term solution.
So where do you come down as a doctor on being a vegetarian or eating meat? Is meat something you should try to stay away from?
I think it's important to try to minimize it. I think maybe I think it's okay to have meals where you don't eat meat, even if you're not a vegetarian. I actually have seen that in France quite often at meals. A lot of my friends will say, well, I usually don't eat meat for dinner or something like that. I think meat does have some risks associated with it if you're eating it every single meal and in high quantities because of the amount of saturated fats that can be in meats. But I think everything in moderation is okay. But being a vegetarian is also okay as long as you know what nutrients you might be missing by not eating meat, as long as you replace things like iron with like beans or other vegetables that might have the same nutrients. Yeah.
Any questions coming in?
We actually have a bunch of comments and questions.
Great.
Dr. Dovek actually says she's tuning in. They're tuning in live from the OR, so she's got some great comments here.
I'll be in the OR in an hour. So.
Okay, well, we have you until then. Several people, Danielle, Stacy, they are all saying hi. Dr. Dovek said, what are your thoughts on diets like Weight Watchers and MetaFast?
That's a good question.
Well, thanks, Dr. Dovek, for that question. Well, I think some of the problems with those diets, such as MetaFast, it can be very expensive. That's one of the things. I do know people who've been on that diet, and it's a very expensive type of diet. You have to order things. I think when a diet becomes something that you have to order food from, and it's very restrictive in a sense, where you're not eating certain food groups and avoiding certain things, I think it's hard to say that that's going to be a diet that you're going to keep for the rest of your life. I think it's important not to get into short-term solutions, because the problem is once you restrict your diet too much, then once you get tired of that diet, then what can happen is you can start going into binge eating, or you go into starvation and your metabolism can go down, and then it becomes even harder to burn calories. So I think the important thing is really to focus on changes that you think you can make for the rest of your life. It doesn't really matter what happens, this year or next year. Obviously, it's nice to lose, 20 or 30 pounds. But the problem is, if in 3 years you will have regained that and then some, then what's the point? And that's really why, in some patients who are morbidly obese, they've already tried all these diets.
Sure.
And they've regained more weight. And that's usually when they come and see us. And that's where we can really help to give them more of a long-term solution.
If you could offer one piece of advice to someone who has a lifelong struggle with weight, and I feel like I feel like my weight swings 30 pounds one way or the other if I'm not careful. What would that advice be?
Well, I'll be honest. I think, like I said, it's not just you. It's me. It's everyone in the United States. I was just looking at the statistics. The latest statistics: 77% of adult males are overweight. So it's almost 80%. And if you look at the rate of obesity, it's almost 40% now.
Wow. So
people with the BMI over 30. Now, if you look at the statistics from the 1960s, the percentage of obesity was 10%.
Wow.
So it's gone crazy. Like,
right.
If you look at the last 30, 40 years, the rate of obesity has quadrupled, which is crazy. And if you think about the kind of things that you can do, I think fad diets are not going to be the solution. It's going to be finding long-term solutions. So everybody sort of knows what's healthy and what's not. The thing is trying to change your behavior so that you start eating what you know is healthy, incorporating 30 minutes of activity every day. If you're going to be watching TV, maybe do it on the treadmill or on an elliptical. 30 minutes every day of activity could be playing with your kids, going outside. One thing I've noticed, that I have 4 kids, and they all do soccer and other things like that, and it's so unfair because I see all the parents sitting on the sidelines, just watching their kids.
We yell and scream, though. Good job, Hope.
I almost want to say to the other parents, come on, why don't we do our own game?
That's a good idea.
I think that would be a good idea, because it's, I'm going from game to game, and basically I'm just sitting in a chair.
Right.
They have those little foldable chair things.
Right.
And I wish I could be exercising too. And
well, there's ways we can.
Creative solutions like that might be.
Am I wrong to think that housework is that cutting the grass, that mopping the floor, that's all exercise, right?
It's all exercise. Just being active. Walking is the simplest thing that you can do. Almost no matter where you live, you can walk somewhere for 30 minutes. And some people have the little health trackers.
Sure.
I think those can be a nice motivation. Some of them are not too expensive. They keep your heart rate. It's not a perfect solution, but it helps you to kind of stay motivated, and you realize how many calories, how many steps you're doing every day. That can be very helpful. Personally, I was a swimmer when I was young, so that's what I like doing. But I have a busy schedule, and it's not always easy to incorporate it. So especially when you have a big family.
Well, I'll point out that the doctor, Dr. Timothee Friesen, is young, so maybe he hasn't gone through all the phases of life yet. I want to ask you, is it harder to diet as you age?
So your metabolism definitely does decrease, and the older you get, the higher your risk of obesity. Now there is an increasing rate of obesity even among teenagers and children in the United States. It's actually very high. But as you age, yes, your metabolism goes down and your risk of obesity goes up.
So it becomes
even harder.
Yeah. Mindy's got another question coming in.
We have some great questions. I have actually a few here. Is measuring more important than weighing your food for portion size?
That's an interesting question. I think a more accurate way of doing it is always to weigh it, because volume can sometimes vary if things are more packed in, there's more air in it. I think most cooks, like chefs, they weigh their food. They don't measure it with volumes. Although that's another European American thing. In Europe, recipes tend to be by weight, and here I've noticed it's mostly by cups. And but I think weight is more accurate. But if you don't have a scale, I don't think it makes a big difference.
We have another question that might be better for one of our dietitians. What is a safe calorie intake to lose weight for someone who can't exercise like other people because of disability and being type 2 diabetic?
Yeah. Well, for the average American, 2,000 calories is usually what's recommended. If you look at the dietary allowance on certain types of foods, decreasing that can be safe, but you don't want to decrease it too much. You should really talk to your physician if you're unable to exercise, to try to come up with exactly how many calories might be healthy for you. It's going to depend on your height. It's going to depend on what your basic metabolism is. Most people should be able to burn about that amount, but yeah, talk to your physician about that, because it's going to depend. Each person is going to be different.
And what do you think about shakes for breakfast? Or as a meal replacement in general? Are some better than others?
Yeah, there's so many different shakes and protein shakes and things like that. We do recommend, for some patients, especially right after they have surgery when they can't take solids, we do recommend that patient drink some protein shakes. In general, it's always better to eat real food, but it's hard to do it. So instead of eating a bagel or a donut or something really healthy, obviously a protein shake is always going to be healthier than that. But the better choice is to eat some real food, like fruits or eggs or something something that's going to have higher protein, less fat, and not too many high sugars. One thing that I didn't mention, one big thing that people can do, and I give these presentations to patients who come seeking to potentially have bariatric surgery. One of the biggest things that you can do that I've noticed in the United States is soda. People drinking soda. If you're able to decrease the amount of soda that you drink, it can make a huge difference. And it's even diet sodas, which is not really an intuitive thing, but even drinking diet soda can cause obesity. And scientists think it's because you're stimulating your body to crave sweet things. And it doesn't really matter the fact that it doesn't have any calories, it still gets your body used to that level of sweetness that you then crave in other foods. So you might require things that are sweeter, even though you don't really need that amount of sweetness. So that's one other thing.
I've noticed lately that there are a lot more waters on the market, not just straight water, but maybe I should start by saying, how much water should we be drinking on a daily basis? Because I think that's got something to do with a healthy diet.
Yeah. Not getting dehydrated is very important. We usually recommend that patients drink about 64 ounces of water.
So
every
8
day.
glasses of 8 ounces.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I think most people drink things that are diuretics. So caffeine, for example, most people have some coffee or tea in the morning. That's going to increase the amount of water that you're going to have to take because you're going to pee out some of that water.
Right.
So that's why 64 ounces is the number that and it's water or things that are, it can be sweetened water.
Bubbles?
Bubbles are fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, we restrict it a little bit in patients who've had surgery. So that's a different category, but after you've had surgery on your stomach, it's better not to drink carbonated beverages. But someone who hasn't had bariatric surgery, bubbles can be fine.
I feel like I'm faking my body out by having carbonated water and instead of soda.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
if it doesn't contain an artificial sweetener
Okay.
or sugar, it's fine in terms of, it's anything that keeps you, what's important is staying motivated, keeping some variety in your diet. The problem with a lot of diets or fad diets is that you're just eating the same thing every day. Like, for example, an Atkins diet where you're eating a lot of meats and fatty things, and it can lead to boredom. And then, in a way, that's how some of those diets work, is that you become so sick of eating those foods that you actually eat less because you're just not interested in eating anymore, and that's why you lose weight.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen that in some of the research papers. They say that's how some of these diets actually work, is that people, like, for example, there's a diet I was reading, it started in the 1930s, that was called the grapefruit diet.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the first fad diets, and people had to drink all this grapefruit juice, and they found that some people were losing weight just because they got so tired of drinking the grapefruit that they were basically taking in less calories. But once they really got sick of it, then they would overeat because now they could start eating again, and there was this binge eating, and so people would obviously gain more weight after that.
I feel like one of my issues is stress eating, where you find yourself either anxious or just your mind is going as you're stressed out. You're thinking about a lot of different things, and you're eating mindlessly.
Yeah.
Is that a common problem?
It's almost, among our patients, it's almost everyone has it. It's not just stress eating, it's also emotional eating. So not just stress, but depression or sadness, or you have a stressful moment in your life or you become sad. Most people who are obese turn to food as a comfort. And we do have them see psychologists before they have surgery to make sure it doesn't dip into something like an eating disorder, like bulimia or anything like that. One of the things that you can do, as a solution would be to have a healthy snack that's ready, so that when you do get that urge to mindlessly eat, you have something that's at least semi-healthy, so you don't turn to things like chips or candy bars or things like that. But if you have some carrots or something else that's maybe not quite as healthy, but that you might enjoy more, at least something that's there and that's available.
Sure.
So that when you do get that urge.
Another question that just came up real quick I want to throw in, then Mindy, do you have more coming in? I've got, and you're more than welcome to post your questions too. If you just tuned in, we're with Dr. Timothee Friesen, who does bariatric surgery, among others, at GBMC. You talked about the percentage of obesity being so high in our country. What about if someone is, with someone else who they see is obviously unhealthy, and they want to support that person, but at the same time you see them struggling with weight? What can someone do to help out a friend or a partner, or to support a healthier lifestyle?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'll see sometimes is patients will come into my office, and it'll be a mother and a daughter, or even friends sometimes. And I think one of the most successful patients that we have are people who do it as a team. So the same way as if you're training for a 5K or for a marathon, if you do it with someone else, it motivates you to, one day you might not feel like exercising or running. You call, your friend will call you and motivate you, and you basically support each other. And I think, if you have someone who's having trouble losing weight, then try to show them the example. Try to have them do it as a team, and that can be very helpful.
Any other questions coming in?
We don't have any questions right now. Lots of viewers, lots of people that are liking what you're saying.
Well, we're talking about weight loss, and we're heading into Thanksgiving, which was one of the reasons I hope that we could schedule this for today. With Halloween coming up, I've already seen all the articles about orthodontists are preparing extra office time, and then of course that's followed by Thanksgiving. What do you do? That's the American tradition to sit down, and everyone in my family gets the plate. You got the mashed potatoes, the sauerkraut, the corn, everything. What's the solution? Because you want to feel like you participate in Thanksgiving, but at the same time, smaller portions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you could do would be to kind of make a pact, with your family, and just call them and say, hey, this year let's try to do something healthy. And I think portions are one thing, but you can also, bring things that are healthy. You can make other versions of the same foods that are healthier. I think one of the things before we run out of time that I wanted to talk a little bit about, because I know a lot of people have. I saw some of the questions. One of the questions was about a keto diet, and I know. So I started reading a little bit more about that. I'm not a nutritionist, but I did spend a little bit of time doing research on all these different diets, and I wanted to kind of help people to have a way of detecting what might be a fad diet. So a lot of these diets, the way that you know if it's a fad diet and not something that's more of a long-term healthy way of eating will be if they rely on things like pseudoscience. So a lot of them will talk about detoxing. That's a big red flag if you hear that, because there's definitely no science behind detoxing. If you look at those claims, they never say which toxin they're talking about. Things like secret discoveries, that only they know about, and this famous scientist has found this new way of. If there's a scientist out there who knows of something that can make people lose weight, he would be a billionaire by now. So he wouldn't keep it a secret. He wouldn't be talking about it at 2 a.m. on TV.
Right.
You know that. Also, people who talk about food obesity being the result of an allergy to food. So these are things that don't make sense. If you hear things like that, or obesity being caused by too much stool being left in your colon, so you have to do colonics and things like that to get rid of those toxins that are in your colon. You have to be really careful when you hear about things like that. Also, when there's celebrities endorsing it, then there's a financial gain related to that particular diet. Or if they ask you to pay for seminars or for like special foods that you have to order it through the mail, you're not going to be able to do that the rest of your life. So you already know that. Basically, diets that sound more like a religion rather than something that's healthy, that's a big red flag. I wrote some of the diets that I thought might be entertaining, even if it's not. There's one called the baby food diet, and I thought that was really interesting. So all you do is eat baby food. Obviously, not a good idea. I'm not recommending it. There's one called the 5-5-2 diet, which is intermittent fasting. So you eat as much as you want for 5 days, and you fast for 2 days.
Wow.
And obviously, that's unhealthy because you're going to overeat during those 5 days, and then you're going to starve yourself, which is going to be unhealthy for those 2 days.
Let me ask you real quick. Do we all need to eat 3 times a day, 4 times a day? I mean, is it better to eat small portions throughout the day, or is it better to have...
It's better to eat smaller, more frequent meals. I think most research has shown that. The most unhealthy thing you can do is starve yourself for the whole day, and then at the end of the day, eat one big meal. You're going to decrease your metabolism. You have to think of your body sort of as a furnace. I don't know if people who have a fireplace know this. You have to keep putting wood in it, or else the flame burns down, and then you don't have any fire to burn the wood.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to keep it going at a low rate. I also saw some other diets. There was one called the paleo diet. That's actually a paleo diet. It's actually a pretty famous diet right now. I even saw it in the store. They sell these pre-made paleo diet things. This one is where you're supposed to eat like a caveman, and it's based on some pseudoscience about trying to figure out what cavemen were eating. And obviously, if you look into it, it doesn't really make any sense because it can lead to deficiencies if you're not eating a wide variety of foods. Yeah.
We actually just got several questions,
Okay.
and it's almost time to
wrap up.
So I want to ask these real quick. Amy asked, "We have changed our lives for this fabulous journey. What do you suggest we do when we start to slow down? I have read some crazy posts on resets of starvation patterns. They don't sound healthy. What do you recommend when we stall when the weight loss stalls?"
Yeah, I definitely don't recommend starving yourself. What we usually recommend, and this does happen, overall patients who have bariatric surgery do have very good long-term weight loss, but there are patients who start to regain weight and then they start to become really panicked because you've been through this big surgery and now you're regaining weight. The solution is almost never having another surgery. So that's one question that a lot of people ask me, like, do I need to have another surgery to make my stomach even smaller or convert to another procedure? That's almost never the solution. The solution is usually talking to one of our nutritionists and getting remotivated to eat the correct diet and not starving yourself. That's never going to work.
We've got a question coming in, it looks like from Shanna Goat. Did you see this one, Mindy? She says she eats quickly and then she craves something sweet afterwards. I've noticed myself, the two things that seem to work is not eating after 7, 8 o'clock at night, going to bed almost hungry, not starving, but I mean, I try to cut my calories as the day wears on, and I find that I crave sugar less. Is there a trick to breaking the sugar craving habit that we all have?
Wow. Yeah, it's a very good point. One of the things you were mentioning is not eating late at night. That's really, really important because during the night is when your body stores the energy that it's going to use for the next day, and if you add more calories to the system, that's when the body's really going to, instead of using it as energy, it's going to store it as fat. Tricks to avoid eating complex sugars rather than fast sugars. So eating things like more complex grains rather than eating sugar that you put in your coffee or in candy bars or things like that. That's the main thing. I don't have any super good suggestions about that, but that would be my suggestion.
So eat more couscous, I guess.
Yeah, couscous is delicious.
It is awesome. And salads and more greens.
Yeah.
Get more exercise. Here's what we've learned. Try to cut back on your portion size. With Thanksgiving coming up, try to go with smaller portions. I've got that. Stay away from the sodas, even the diet sodas. The carbonated waters are okay as long as they don't have sugars and added sweets.
Artificial sweeteners.
Artificial sweeteners. Yeah. Try to eat throughout the course of the day smaller portion sizes. Drink a little alcohol. I love that tip. We learned that it's okay to drink some wine.
Definitely.
Beer, not so much. Is there a difference in alcohol?
In small studies are not really very consistent. It does seem like alcohol is one of the ingredients that is healthy. Some other research seems to suggest that it's more red wine, but a small amount of beer is probably okay.
All right.
Because it makes you happy. It's important.
Right. We all need to be happy, especially when we're losing weight.
Exactly.
So that's basically our show for today. We will continue to do these through GBMC, and I'm not sure what the next date is. Mindy, you want to mention?
It's November the 21st, and our topic is to be determined.
All right. Well, you keep watching. Check in daily with GBMC. A great hospital. And let's give a plug real fast to GBMC. One thing that's important to know is in addition to the campus in Towson, they also have satellite offices. Do you want to speak to that in a second, or for a second, Mindy?
We do have practices in Perry Hall and Owings Mills, so there are other practices that are part of GBMC.
We've been visiting with Dr. Timothee Friesen. Would you like to speak about how people could contact you regarding questions about bariatric surgery?
Yeah, I mean you can send more questions on Facebook. I'll be happy to answer any further questions that you have. You can come to one of our information sessions. If you come to if you go to the website for the Comprehensive Obesity Management Program at GBMC, we have information sessions, several every month, and I love giving those. I'd be happy to meet you there.
The next one is Saturday.
Okay.
I believe it's at 10:30 in the morning. The information's on GBMC's Facebook page.
All right.
So
Yep.
if anyone's interested.
And you'll see me on the track at the park trying to get some exercise. It's a good thing to walk, right? Just at least
Definitely.
walking.
Yep.
That's the deal. Thanks for watching. Michael J. on air at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can follow me, and I'll be back in touch with you here on GBMC very soon. Thank you.